So they did all this innovation. They designed and created all these fabrics that these customers took the designs and brought them to these other countries where they dumped the dye waste and have had no labor rules that were enforced. So suddenly, so it used to be the profit margin in the industry used to be modest. People used to be making 10 to 20% profit margins. The spinner, the weaver, they were all happy at 10% profit. And people who worked at the Gap made modest salaries. And the people I knew at Levi's made reasonable salaries. Suddenly, when they started buying all these products in places that it cost so much less, they did not lower the prices significantly at the retail. They, instead of making 20%, they're starting to make 80% profits.
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast. I'm Linley Dixon, co-director of the Real Organic Project. We're a grassroots, farmer-led movement with an add-on organic label distinguishing crops grown in healthy soils and animals raised on pasture without synthetic fertilizers or toxic chemicals. You just heard from Sally Fox, who started breeding cotton back in 1982, when plant resistance and old-fashioned selection were frontline tools for cutting pesticide use. This isn't a subject that we cover very often, but it's a fascinating one, and we're lucky to get Sally to sit down with us and tell her story. You'll hear her explain why the organic cotton story got narrowed to only what happens on the farm, while dyeing and processing impacts were pushed aside. An outcome which became her own personal turning point and convinced her to pursue naturally colored cotton instead.
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast, and I'm talking with Sally Fox. Sally, I've waited a long time to have this conversation with you. You are a true pioneer of organic cotton in America and in the world. And I want to hear the story of that. I know you have a love affair with cotton. I want to hear that. I know you love soil, and that's so important. So we have a lot to talk about. So where should we start? Should we start with organic cotton? And you've grown it for how many years?
Right. Well, I started in 1982 working for a breeder, a cotton breeder. So I was employed because I knew how to raise a nematode that was a pathogenic nematode for cotton. And his focus in his breeding work was always, he bred tomatoes and cotton, and he was always breeding for resistance to diseases and nematodes. And so if you're gonna test varieties, or if you have a group of potential varieties and you want to know if one of them is more resistant to something than the other, then you have to expose them to it, whatever it is. In this case, he wanted a bunch of root knot nematode grown. And I happened to have been studying under a professor of soil ecology. I had been working on rearing a biological control of root knot nematode. It was a bacillus. And so I knew how to raise root knot nematodes. So that's why I got the job, to make a big planting area full of root knot nematode. And then we could test his potential varieties to see how resistant they were to root knot nematode. But I also got the job as the pollinator, and it was this chance to go into one of the pillars of reducing pesticide misuse. So there are all kinds of ways to reduce pesticide misuse, and one of the real foundations is breed varieties that are resistant to whatever it is whatever your troubles are, breed a variety that's resistant to it. And back in those days, that was all done by classical plant breeders. And that's who employed me in 1982.
Okay. Okay, that was before gene splicing and all of that.
Way before. This is all by actual, just put all the seeds in, expose them to what you are interested in finding, if they're resistant to it or not. Expose them and observe who is resistant and who isn't. And then you decide which of those seeds to bring forward based on how resistant it is.
And then you breed the seeds from that plant, and then again choose the ones that are most resistant. Right. And after a certain number of generations, you've got a real winner.
Yes, it's the old-fashioned selection process.
Yeah. And he was working with cotton varieties at that point, as well as tomatoes?
Yes, he was breeding tomatoes varieties and breeding and developing and breeding cotton varieties. And he was so innovative. He had such great ideas. In fact, just now, like, what is this? How many years since 1982 are we?
About 43 years ago, something like.
Right.
Yeah.
Just now, there's all these companies that are doing his ideas. And they're doing great business. He proposed these ideas and the cotton community poo-pooed it, wouldn't allow it in California, all this stuff. It was crazy. He was so ahead of his time.
What was his name?
His name was Dr. Bob Dennett.
Okay.
And he was in his 70s when I was working for him, and I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
And at his funeral, so he was so revered by the canning tomato world, that at his funeral, every canning tomato CEO was there.
Wow.
I mean, he totally changed the canning industry for Northern California. Northern California is a place where a lot of canning tomatoes are produced. And it was his resistant varieties. He bred fusarium and verticillium, and these are the major soil diseases of tomatoes. He was the best at this.
Yeah.
He was.
He was working private industry?
He had his own company. So he used to work for a company called Goldsmith Seeds in Monterey. He was just an amazing breeder. He grew up in Hawaii as a kid and got into plant breeding, and he was an unusual person in every respect. He worked for a while, but back then there were independent breeders that supported themselves by developing varieties, licensing them out to seed companies, and then by the royalties that the seed companies paid, it supported their work.
And they kept going.
A simple thing which nobody does anymore because somehow that whole system got dismantled when everyone got so big.
Yeah. All right. We'll come back to big because that's important. But tell me about what happened for you then.
Okay.
You were doing all this work to support his work.
Right. So I got employed to work for him. It was right after I had my master's degree in integrated pest management. Okay, so, and I had come back from being in the Peace Corps in West Africa and all this pesticide misuse and disasters and all these things. And but before I ever went and studied entomology or any of these things, I had been a hand spinner and a hand weaver and a hand knitter. So my passion were textiles. And I had once seen, so I taught hand spinning to older people as one of my jobs that I had during college to pay because I came from a family that couldn't contribute. So I was working all the time. And one job I had was teaching hand spinning to members of the Central Coast Hand Spinning Hand Weavers Guild. And I had this wonderful student. Her name was Dorothea. And Dorothea was in her 70s and I was 20. I was in college, undergrad. And she shared this terrible story of her daughter who had been an art teacher in San Francisco during the tie-dye era where everybody's tie-dyeing, and her daughter didn't wear gloves, and the dyes got into her skin and migrated to her brain and made her a literal vegetable, and was in a nursing home and died during the time I was teaching her. Yeah, and so I was like, I had been focused on how to get rid of pesticides from that was like, I got another story. My big deal, the reason I went to college was that I wanted to be part of the team of people that got rid of the misuse of pesticides. So I was all familiar with who made pesticides. But then after teaching her and hearing about these dyes, I thought, well, who makes dyes? So I go back to those days, there's library. You had to go to a library. I went to the Cal Poly library and looking up the history of dyes. Sure enough, the companies that made pesticides all started out by being dye companies. Every single one of them started out as a dye company in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So then I became like, okay, in my own work of spinning, hand spinning, weaving, knitting, I'm not going to use any dyes. Dyes are, in my mind now, they're just as toxic as pesticides, if not more. So in my own work, I started only using natural colors of natural fibers. And there are whole bunches of natural colors in wool, camel hair, muskox. You know, if you look at the animal fibers, there's plenty of colors. But when I went to cotton, which I like to spin, there was just white. And it was like, linen is a beautiful color on its own. There are colors of silk, but cotton was just white. And so at one of the hand weaving convergence things, there was some textile that came from, I think it was either Nicaragua or Guatemala, and it had naturally colored brown cotton in it. So I saw it and I was like, there is color in cotton. I did not know that there was anything other than white. So that, back in my brain, this is like 1977 or something, I see this. And then I'm working for the breeder. This is 1982. He tells me he has this job. I go to work for him. I think it's a full-time job. He says, oh, it's only minimum wage job. So I move up. I had gone to UC Riverside. I move up to Davis. He was outside of Davis. He had a greenhouse that was like 10 miles outside of Davis. He tells me it's minimum wage. Is that okay? Yes, sure, I say. But then he neglects to say it's only 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours at night. And it's like this 10-mile bike ride back and forth every day. And I'm like, how could I even pay rent on 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening? And so I said, I need more hours. And he said, okay, good, clean this greenhouse up. Fine. So I start cleaning this greenhouse and going through the drawers. And one day there's this bag. I open a drawer and there's this lunch-sized bag, just like these. Oh, I shouldn't move. Just like those. And open it up. It's brown cotton. I was like, what? This is here? You have this? Why aren't we doing anything with this? This is the most it's beautiful. It's the whole basis of everything I'm working with.
Yeah.
So. And so when he came and I showed it to him, why aren't we doing anything with this? He's like, oh yeah, we got this crazy breeder from the USDA named Dr. Gus Heyer at Shafter. He's been giving these to everybody, telling us that we can get insect resistant and disease resistant. It's the source of every resistance and it's just the most fabulous cotton. But we can't get rid of the color, he said. And I'm like, who wants to get rid of the color? That's the whole point. So then he goes, no, there's no market for colored cotton. And I said, but we can make a market for colored cotton. Why don't we make a market for colored cotton? And he said, why don't you make a market for colored cotton and you can have that part of the greenhouse and I have ideas of how you could improve the fiber. Because also the fiber was really short. It was not just beautiful. It was also rather short and not easy to spin. And I was a good hand spinner.
Yes. Right? Okay, I have to interrupt. So just so that people have a sense, the white cotton, which was the norm, was extremely vulnerable
to everything.
Right.
But he was, of course, breeding for existence.
I understand, but just so that people understand, it's my understanding that cotton, this is pre-genetic modification, was the most heavily sprayed crop in California.
In the world. Everywhere. But that is not its fault. There actually are white cottons that are resistant, and people have been breeding resistant to this disease, resistant to that disease, resistant to pests. It's been a continual process, this breeding for resistance. It's not as though no one was doing it. And that's what the breeder was doing that I was working for. But it is because it's been a worldwide commodity, and because it was so grown in such vast areas, it became the target of everybody. Every chemical company, of course, found it worthwhile to register their chemicals on cotton because it's such a big commodity. So everything was always approved and ready, and it was such a large mechanized crop that it was an easy place to park many a pesticide, it seemed to me, looking from the outside. And indeed, a big focus of the integrated pest management people was reducing the pesticide load on cotton because it was such a major commodity crop. But still, in my mind, and in every breeder's mind, we knew that the white cottons needed to be bred to be more resistant, which is why this breeder was giving these seeds to everybody.
Yes.
The USDA guy.
Yeah.
And nobody wanted to deal with the color, is what I heard.
If you could deal with the color, then suddenly you were freed from a great deal of chemical input.
Exactly. That was the purpose. Like, wow, it's supposed to be resistant to every disease. It's supposed to be resistant to insects, and it has color, like one more. So what it didn't have was fiber length. What it didn't have was fiber strength. And what it didn't have was the same amount of fiber around the seed. And it didn't have machine pickability. So it had a lot of things it needed to be in order to be commercially produced and used. And that's what I focused on. So that's when my work began. And of course, my focus, so I wasn't an organic farmer in 1982. I only started breeding. So at first I had everything in these pots in the greenhouse. And then I just thought cotton breeding was just too boring. I couldn't take it. Just too much. And there wasn't enough hours. There was like 2 hours. So I ended up taking this job for the county of San Mateo as a medfly trapper, and then I worked in all the normal things entomologists worked in, which is sort of pest exclusion stuff. Then I got this job in Bakersfield as the IPM, working for the IPM guy. And what I did was, as I took all these jobs that were, sort of minimum wage, entry-level jobs in agriculture, and, well, not just agriculture, counties, all that, I had this car, and I always had all the plants. And so wherever I moved, I had all my plants in pots that came with me. And then by 1984, I started, so a couple of years I just had the pots. Then in 84, I started renting land. And that's when I started farming the cotton more than just some pots.
Yes. Okay. So just to catch up for people, cotton is a commodity crop, meaning basically it's a very low value per acre.
Yes.
It can be high value if you have enough acres, but it's very, very low value per acre. So it's done on scale.
Yes.
And because the scale is so great, that's why chemical companies, because it costs a lot to get a chemical registered. Yes. So they go, oh, great, here we've got 1 million acres of cotton in the world. Right. Let's register all these chemicals for them.
Right. And it's so mechanized, there's one guy with 1,000 acres.
Yeah.
Right? The norm then was one farmer had 500 acres with one helper. Yeah. And machines. So you have machine pick, machine everything. So when you don't have any labor, who's getting the weeds? You have to use herbicides.
Yeah.
You have to, and you're picking with a machine. You don't have labor, what you have are machines, and then your other tool becomes pesticide. It's the only way, because back then a good profit per acre for cotton was $100 profit per acre. Yeah. So we are not talking, so you had to have a lot of acres to make it. And then cotton, of course, is only a rotation. People aren't growing cotton every year on the same ground. They grow cotton. It's in the San Joaquin Valley, where I ended up being for quite some time. The normal rotation was cotton, alfalfa, sugar beets, and wheat.
Can you explain for people who don't understand why would a farmer choose to have a rotation?
Well, even if you weren't an IPM person, you wouldn't want to constantly use your soil. You wouldn't want to, the plant uses different aspects of the soil. Cotton is a tropical perennial grown as an annual in temperate climates. It wants to be a tree. It wants to, the first year, establish a taproot that goes down 4 feet. It puts out a woody root mass. So it actually has this good position in the rotation for breaking up hard pans. You know, like it will go down. A lot of people, use radishes as their cover crop to break up, but cotton does that. Cotton does all these cool things to your soil, like break up the hard pan. And the other big plus is, despite all the rhetoric, it uses half the water of all the other commercial crops. So it's often used in drought years when you can't grow anything else. Like alfalfa at least 2 to 3, 4 times as much water as cotton requires. So it has this niche. It's a low value crop, but it's useful in your rotation.
Okay, and it's very useful to us.
Yes, it's very useful.
We make our clothes out of cotton, and we have for a very long time.
Yes, and back then we had a domestic textile industry. So there was a great incentive from the textile industry to support and encourage cotton to be included in this rotation, even though you didn't make very much money on it. It was still important for the mills that they had domestic source of cotton. And then it was important for the farmer to have something to break up the hard pan. And, it's like, it was part of their deal, part of their rotation, but never anywhere as profitable as sugar beets or alfalfa, or even, it's kind of maybe like wheat, sort of a low value commodity crop that somebody else dealt with. Like they would grow huge amounts of it, bring it to the gin, and those people would sell it and you'd get your money. And it was heavily subsidized by the government because the USDA really wanted a domestic source of cotton for the textile industry in the U.S.
How would they subsidize it? Would they make direct payments to farmers?
Back then, I'm not sure all the ways. Like, it's changed so much over the decades, but one of the things I was keenly aware of that actually knocked my business out and was contributed to the end of my business was that they would pay the storage of the cotton in the warehouse. So when you grew, as a farmer, when you grew your cotton, it would be ginned, and the seed is separated from the lint, and the lint is baled up. The bales would be put in a warehouse. The USDA would cover the storage for however long it took you to sell it. So this doesn't seem like a big deal, but it actually is. There were all these sorts of little things like that that reduced the risk for the farmer, making it a comfortable crop to put in.
Okay, so you've got this crop that's being nuked with pesticides and insecticides and herbicides.
Herbicides primarily. In California, hardly any pesticides were used on cotton. We did not have the pests. The use of pesticides is actually highly regional. So the main place that the worst places for the pesticide use in the United States were Arizona, New Mexico, southern Texas, and the Southeast. Those were the areas with the worst insect pests. California had one insect pest that was a problem called ligus, and people would spray 1 or 2 times back then, 1 or 2 times. The main pesticide used on cotton were herbicides, and that was everywhere. And that was, so it was so funny to me that I was always thinking about pesticides because I had studied entomology, and I was always thinking insects. And then it turned out the biggest issue with cotton was not where I was in California, was not the insecticide. It was the herbicide and the defoliation. So defoliation was horrific, and a lot of people got asthma from it. Defoliation was required once people started machine picking cotton, white cotton. because you had to get the leaves to fall off before you could put the machine in the field. If the leaves were still there, it would stain the white cotton green. And if you had too many green leaves in the cotton as it was waiting to be ginned, you could have combustion. It would ferment in the storage and then go up in flames. So they had to invent all these chemicals to get the leaves to dry up and fall down before they could machine pick. So if you were in Arizona or southern Texas, they were spraying insecticides 12 plus times a year, whereas in California it was 1 or 2 times a year only. So it was very regional, the insecticide use.
But the herbicides.
The herbicides were universal everywhere, and the defoliation, another thing that everybody was using.
Which was also an herbicide.
Horrible. Well, yeah, some of them were.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, they're doing the same thing now with grain crops.
Using the same drying desiccants. First they use a desiccant.
Yeah.
Yes. And then
with an herbicide to kill the plant, so that it's a way of rapidly drying out the grain before harvest.
Yes, and that was the same concept. So it started out in cotton in the 70s they were doing this, right? And everyone who lived there was subject to breathing all these horrible things. So in my mind, so I worked in Bakersfield at the farm advisor's office with my plants in pots, and then I started renting land. I eventually got a job with benefits in San Diego, and I used to drive back and forth every weekend to work on my cotton in Bakersfield. So everybody else was having a weekend. I was drive up and work on my cotton and then drive back. And then eventually I left that job and got another job in Wasco, which is where they grew the original BT, the Bacillus thuringiensis, in a fermentation vessel. I worked at that facility for a number of years. All this work I always did was to pay for this research, right?
Okay, I want to go to the BT, but first, several things first. One is, I want to just point out that we've talked about high use of insecticide and high use of herbicide. And the third thing that is invisible to most people is once you've milled the cotton, you have to dye it. Right. I'm wearing some nice blue jeans. They did not grow blue in the field. No. And let's talk about the dyes that are used.
Right. Okay, so back to my spinning and weaving days, right? Every single thing from hand spinning, hand knitting, and hand weaving translates to machine spinning, machine weaving, and machine knitting, everything. So the dyeing process is sort of this joyous thing. People love colors. They love colors. It makes you happy. It makes you, each color affects you differently. And I think we're the only animal that doesn't have fur or feathers, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like we have been, as humans, our path to being who we are and forming community is very, very, very much textiles played an important part. And so the craftsmanship of textiles is a crucial part, in my opinion, of being human. And dyeing things, before chemical dyes came into being, people were using plants and minerals to dye their textiles, and utilizing all natural colors of natural fibers. So people used every natural fiber's color, and then they would dye the white versions of wool and the white versions of cotton and anything that was white, they could dye it. And dyeing is expressive and exciting, and is where so much creativity comes in. When you go to take that to an industrial scale with cotton, what I observed and what is still true is that you have to first you take the fiber and you either spin it and then bleach it and then dye it, or you spin the fiber and then you weave it, then you can bleach the fabric and dye it But all dyeing requires first bleaching, then dyeing. And since, I don't know, 1860, 1870, I'm not sure the exact year that the chemical dyes all began to become the thing. But once they started doing it with chemicals, the waste effluent of the chemicals themselves became a toxic waste issue. And so when I first entered the world of textile, when my cotton first came in, the first customers I had were in the United States, Europe, and Japan. And part of the reason there was interest in these cottons, once I solved the technical problems of length and strength and machine pickability, the first mills that took it up were interested in it because they were paying a lot of money to take the toxic waste from the dye process to toxic waste dumps. So there were laws passed in the 70s and 80s, the Clean Water Act here, but in Europe and Japan, same thing. There were laws that you could not dump these dyes into rivers. You had to clean them up. You had to concentrate them and dispose of them properly. And the cost of dyeing used to be the cost of the energy and water involved in bleaching and dyeing it, which involves water and power. But the cost of the cleanup ended up being 2 to 3 times the cost of the dyeing. So when my cotton first was on the marketplace, the economics of using it actually there was incentive to try to figure out how to use these cottons because of the cost of the cleanup of the dyes. So if it cost $1, let's just use this figure, $1 a pound to dye it, it used to cost $2 to $3 a pound to clean the waste up. So therefore, the farmer could make a lot more money per pound, and the fiber could be sold for a price that brought in, so the farmer, instead of making $100 an acre, could be making $500 an acre.
If that cotton did not need to be dyed.
Correct, and dye waste not cleaned up.
Right.
So in the beginning, when I first entered the market and this was first being sold to mills, the farmers were making considerably more per acre on producing this cotton, and the mill was happy to get it and it made sense financially because of the cost of dye cleanup.
Which was based on things like the Clean Water Act that required that they not just take it out back and dump it in the river.
Correct.
So regulation made it shifted the whole equation.
It shifted the equation, and finally, for once, farmers were making money on cotton.
Yeah.
But it was small, just
Yeah.
niche market, small, but the vision was big. I had Levi's was at that point, first they started with 150 acres, went to 500, something like that, then to 3,000. And they asked me to get 100,000 acres worth of seeds ready for the following year.
Was this certified organic cotton? Was there even
Nobody
organic
even
certification
knew.
yet?
There was, and I was growing. We were growing it, or nobody even knew. Okay, so this is we're still on the California food, and you remember back those labels that used to be organic by the state of California.
Right, they had their own standards.
Right,
That's right.
We had California. In Vermont, you had one.
Right.
And so we had these state standards. I worked with Texas. We were growing it in Texas. I worked with the TDA to come up with Texas standards for fabrics. We had the first textile standards of fabrics written and signed into law by who was the funny, Rick Perry signed it. It was Jim Hightower.
Jim Hightower, of course.
We did the first draft of the organic textile standards was done under Hightower. Then it was Rick Perry. So anyway, this is before there was.
There wasn't USDA certification,
no USDA
but there
yet.
was a market developing for organic.
But no one knew they were buying organic.
Okay, so Levi wasn't saying we want organic.
No, they just
said
wanted color.
we
but
want color
I'm the
cotton.
one that wanted organic.
Yeah.
So I took this as my big chance, right? So like I was like, okay, here's my chance. Right? Everybody had been saying, oh, you can't grow cotton organically. Oh, there's no market for it. Oh, you heard this your whole life, right? When you started out with the vegetables, you can't do it. Number one, you can't do it. Then you do it. Then they say, oh no, it costs too much, right? Yeah. Then they say, oh, the market is too small. On and on. Every single thing they say. And then the more I heard it, the angrier I'd get, right? And then I was like, okay, if you have to make more money, what's the perfect thing? Here's these dyes that cost all this money. If you have this cotton that grows in color, then all that money can go to the farmer, and the farmer can figure out how to grow organically, can pay for the hoe crew and figure out all these intricacies, which took a lot of money. And in those places in Arizona where they were spraying 12 times a year, they needed to use pheromones, insect pheromones. They needed to be highly sophisticated in the way of dealing with the pests. And that sophistication took money. And if you're going to do that, can't make $100 an acre. You have to make a lot more per acre to pay for someone to go and sweep your field once a week and tell you what insects are. And if you're going to buy BT, you have to apply it at the exact right moment. All this stuff required people, expertise, and money. And if you're going to do that, you have to have a product that sells more. So here it was. Here's Levi's buying it at this high price that brings them in the money. The contract's with me. I'm the one saying to the farmers, I want you to, if you want to grow for me, this is what I want from you. I want you to help me figure out how to do this organically. So I had buy-in of the people growing it, wanted to figure it out. They wanted the contract, they wanted to figure it out, and they had, by the time that this all collapsed, we had 5,000 certified acres, certified organic, certified with OCIA. Back then, it still wasn't USDA, but it was by the California standards. 5,000 certified acres in Arizona where people are spraying 12 times plus a year for insecticides. We had 3,000 acres in transition. We had some that was conventional, but even the conventional had no insecticides so even the ones that weren't on the path to organic, which a few, when they first would start out, would say, can we just farm it our regular way while we get used to it? Those people, they just couldn't handle the no herbicide thing. They didn't have access to people to weed the crop. Yeah. But they weren't using any insecticides and they weren't using defoliants.
So Sally, let me ask you, for you at that point, what did organic mean? And maybe you could say, oh, let me tell you what it means to me now. But was it just about no pesticides, or was it about something else?
There we go. Because I came to organic from the no pesticide side, right? Being studying entomology, nematology, plant pathology, what mattered to me was to not expose farm workers and the people who lived in rural areas to all these pesticides. That was my entry into the concept was, and as a child, like once somebody brought a no pest strip into the house and I got headaches. We couldn't take no pest strips. And then I was inspired in high school. I was going to be a custom hand spinner. I wasn't going to go to college. I had this whole idea that I was going to spin dog hair for people for a living. But this teacher from, I grew up in Menlo Park in Palo Alto, and this woman from Kenya, her name was she was Miss Swangari to us. She was getting her PhD at Stanford and eventually did receive it and went to work for the UN. But she inspired me to go into entomology and got this internship for me at this company that was founded by Carl Gerasi, who's the one who made the money on the birth control pill. He took some of his money and formed this company that did insect, pheromone, and hormone research. His idea was if we dealt with insect pests with sophistication and using the way they communicate with each other and the way they develop instead of toxins, we could reduce toxicity of agriculture.
Yes, absolutely.
And still to this day, all of us in organic farming rely upon pheromones, and that was all worked out at this company. And I got a job there in 1972 in the insectary raising the insects. So because of Miss Wangari, who then became Dr. Wangari, I was encouraged to go to college and study entomology. And her thing was all this pesticide misuse in Africa, which was horrific. And I experienced later when I was in the Peace Corps. So I came to organic from the concept of how do we provide, how do we farm, how do we produce food without these toxic chemicals. But then, thanks to going to EcoFarm and getting to know real organic farmers, I realized that so much of this whole idea that entomologists had and nematologists and all the other ologists, we're always looking at it from the outside instead of from where it starts, which is the soil. And it was because of EcoFarm, I would say, that I learned more and more about that it actually is about the soil and how do you have a living soil. And if your soil is alive, you won't have all these pests. Sometimes you're going to get locusts coming through that are not from your farm. But many of the key pests that people do experience are a result of imbalances of the soil. So I learned that after I was already drawn to it from the no pesticides side.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
It's so important. Yes, it makes a lot of sense. And I always say we all want food and cotton, shirts, clothing that is not covered with pesticides, right? But that doesn't actually, to me, adequately define organic. These are like the super bonus points. It's what everybody wants. Yes. But why don't we need pesticides for organic crops when they're done well?
Right.
That's the question.
That's the question. And it took me decades of being around real organic farmers to understand the importance of the living soil. And that's where I feel that there's been this kind of the success in the marketplace of organic to the non-farming community. Part of it is by the people who buy food and don't produce it are looking for things that don't have pesticides on them without understanding any of the nuances of how you produce it. Like how we figured out how to grow these crops organically started out with soil and deep connection to it and understanding of its importance. And it became like the crops we produced are for ways for us to fund the soil health. Right? And the crop is like the thing we have to produce so we can pay for the soil health.
Right.
Whereas the people buying the products aren't thinking about soil at all. All they're thinking about is, I want to eat something that doesn't have pesticides on it. So it's like one message from the marketing kind of like took over the minds of the non-farming public, and they don't still understand that when they're buying organic, if they're buying organic from an actual farmer, that's what the farmer's doing, is they're building soil. Now it's all mixed up. Now we have all these people like you have with the hydroponic and this and that, where, oh yes, that stuff is supposedly organic and it is pesticide free, it's stuff, but they're not building soil.
No.
And that's where it's like, whoa, what happened here? All of a sudden, this disconnect between pesticide free and actual organic happened.
Yeah. I just interviewed Julie Guthman, and we were talking about the pressure of industrial organic, is what her term was, against she would call it agroecological, I would call it real organic, and that for industrial organic, all they really care about is permitted inputs.
Yes.
And they really have a mindset that is still chemical. Right. It's just, well, if I can't use that, what can I use instead?
Right, because they're in this precision mindset that the conventional ag community went into back in my youth. Of, okay, we're going to use pesticides, and all my integrated pest management people started it, right? We're going to use pesticides, but we're only going to use them absolutely when they're necessary. So instead of 12 and a half times a year, it's 2. Yeah. And it's not something that's broad spectrum, it's very specific. And so in my lifetime, I've seen the use of pesticides become more sophisticated and less cumbersome, less problematic to the people who live there, and safer for the residue. So when I was young and I would eat something that wasn't organic, I would be physically sick. Like I could only eat organic food or I would get sick, stuck in bed for a day. Now, if I happen to eat something that isn't organic, I don't get sick. So the residues remaining on the conventional food has, in general, become less overtly toxic.
Overtly toxic.
We are still left with all this, glyphosate on the wheat that affects the microbiome. I'm not trying to say it's safe. I'm just trying to say it's not overtly toxic as it was when I was young.
Yeah.
So when I was young, I went to Cal Poly and I joined this natural food co-op, and I remember going and buying all these carrots, and we did all these trades, so somebody would grow organic carrots, and then I remember I'm on my bicycle riding miles to go, we did all this stuff ourselves. The regular, supermarkets wouldn't deal with organic food, but we all formed co-ops. We were riding our bikes, bringing carrots to people.
Yeah.
Right? All this because we believed that this was the most important thing for our health of our bodies, and eventually I learned the soil.
Yes.
But I didn't come from a farming background. I came from an urban, right? So I didn't know about soil as I came to know as time passed. But I did learn this from the farmers that I contracted with, right? Who wanted to be organic and never could because there was no way that the value of the product could support the expenses of going organic.
Okay, so much there. I'm not gonna talk about the fact that it might be that people are, I guess I am gonna talk about it. Just for a moment. Yes, there's less obvious toxicity if I ate the carrot and then I felt sick. But I have 3 nephews who have gotten cancer, one of whom died of it. And they're young. And I don't think that that's just bad break. I think that's because of the level of toxicity, and maybe instead of insecticide, it's herbicide.
Right.
I know one of them is herbicide because he sued Monsanto and won because of it, but he still got the cancer. So this is all around us. It's not going away. The level of cancer is going up, up, up. Okay.
Yes, I agree. I'm just trying to say that when I was young, I was immediately sick.
And no, I hear it.
Did you have that same thing when you were young? Did conventional food make you sick?
No.
Okay, you were stronger than me.
No, I have no memory of feeling ill. Many of the people who I know who really came strongly into organic early, it was because they were getting sick. But for me, it was just a good idea, and it seemed like that's where the party was. All the people I wanted to hang out with were growing organically, so I went to the party, of course. That sounded like fun, but I believe it completely. So I want to talk about the economics here for a moment. If the farmers who are making the transition at this point in your story to being organic, and I guess they're being certified by state agency and OCIA, right? And back in Vermont, it was Vermont Organic Farmers. And we were all just starting out. We didn't know what we were doing. Some of us were farmers, some weren't, but nobody knew what we were doing about organic. It was a new world. I wish I'd known about EcoFarm back then. I would have loved to have come and listened to that, joined that community. But my question is, it costs more to grow it organically. Can you explain why it costs more to do it that way?
All right. So let's just even starting with soil fertility. So if you can buy UN32, which is, I think, still used, right? It's like the cheapest or conventional source of nitrogen in the soil versus an organic form of nitrogen. The price differential for the two forms of nitrogen, one generated by a chemical process, synthetic nitrogen, one generated by microbes digesting biologically developed nitrogen. The cost is, I do believe, still 10 times more for the organic form than the synthetic form. So if we look, even if we just looked at soil inputs, 10 times more for organic versus conventional. Okay. Then we look at the biggest cost on organic cotton, and that is weeds, herbicides. So the cost of herbicides are pretty cheap and easy. And one guy and their person, like as I said, it used to be 500 acres, one guy and one worker who lived on the farm. They could handle 500 acres with herbicides. If you're going to go back to no herbicides, which organic requires, which is why it was so hard and why I still had some people growing no pesticide, no insecticides, no defoliants, but still using herbicides. You have to have access to labor. And you have to prepare your fields differently. So you have to pre-irrigate to get the weeds to come up. Then you have to plant after the first flush of weeds has come up. And then you have to have pretty sophisticated mechanical systems of cultivation. And you also have to have access to people who will come in and get those few weeds between the plants.
So the primary weeding is with a tractor and a cultivator, some kind of sophisticated tines or baskets or something. So you're tilling the very surface of the soil to get the weeds when they're very small.
Right.
And then
you have to have a hoe crew.
You have to have a hoe crew.
And a lot of places that was the Texas High Plains where there were most people couldn't do the organic thing. It was the hoe crew part. They did not have a bunch of people working in vegetables where there were people available to come and weed.
Yeah.
So they could not do the herbicide thing. They could do the no pesticide, they could do the no defoliant, but they couldn't do the no herbicide. So that cost of weeding, hand weeding, still is monumental. The guy that grows my cotton at scale for the mill in Japan that I sell to, and now I have a new customer in Italy, he's in New Mexico, and the part of New Mexico where they grow those peppers, the Hatch. It's near Hatch, New Mexico, that's famous for those peppers that are used in chili rellenos. Those are labor-intensive chili relleno, those peppers. They bring in a lot of money per acre, and people have to singe them. There's a lot of labor. So there are people there working around that you could hire to come and weed. But in places where there are not people to hire, you can't do that. So the cost of organic is not just the cost of the biological fertilizer versus synthetic fertilizer, which of course but maybe not everybody knows, is the synthetic fertilizers damage the biological life in the soil, which is why it's so important to use biological sources of nitrogen and other minerals required. But
it also has a huge carbon footprint.
Right.
A lot of, I think, I can't remember, but it's a large percentage of our national energy is used to make nitrogen fertilizer.
So it's not efficient. It's not an efficient process.
No, Haber-Bosch takes a lot of energy.
It takes a lot of energy, like dying.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. These little things that are kind of hidden, but if that's something you care about, then that's something you should care about.
Right.
Okay, so there's the cost of fertilizer, however, and
there's the cost of
do some
weeding.
cotton farmers grow their fertility as a green manure and till it in?
Yeah, or they either, most places where people grow cotton do not have water for a cover crop in the winter. This is actually one of the propaganda things that these regenerative cotton people are driving me crazy about, because they keep trying to impose cover crops on organic cotton. And they claim because organic cotton producers don't grow cover crops, they aren't regenerative even though they're organic. It's very kind of a mean-spirited, not knowing enough about the fact that most people growing cotton are doing so because they don't have very much water. Because everybody thinks cotton uses all this water. It's like, wait a minute, no. Cotton uses half to 1/4 the water of any other crop. And you tend to put it in places you don't have access to water. And so what you don't have water to do is put a cover crop in very short period of time between, let's say, when you finish the cotton, which might be December. And if you followed, sometimes people grow cotton 2 years in a row, and then they go to their next rotation. So if it's between the 1 year and the second year, you're only talking about a few months. And what they tend to do is, because here in the West, in the irrigated West, our rains come in the winter. What people do is they harvest their crop, they turn it in, they form the beds for the next year, and then the rains come. And yes, you get all sorts of things that grow over that period of time, volunteers, but you didn't necessarily plant a cover crop that gets incorporated in a precise way. If it's a drought winter where you don't get rains, then nothing's growing. And you would not have spent money on a bunch of seeds that didn't sprout because it didn't rain.
Right. I think that something I didn't understand till I started to come out to California is just how frigging dry it is. And now, you know, California has run as an agricultural juggernaut because of irrigation. But now that water is so short, and there's this competition between the population, which is always growing, and the agriculture, and it's gotten drier. So I know really great organic farmers who say, I can't grow a cover crop this year because I don't have access to that much water.
Right. And
So
this is really true for the cotton people. And the sort of rhetoric from the regenerative group is the regenerative people pick on organic cotton for not putting in cover crops religiously, and they pick at them for cultivating, which is the only mechanism of controlling the weeds if you're not using herbicides.
So the regenerative growers you're talking about are using herbicides.
Those regenerative. There's this whole other thing of regenerative organic, which is another thing. But the ones who are not regenerative organic, who are regenerative, they use herbicides. And they believe it's irresponsible that people are touching the soil. They're all on this no disturbing the soil thing, like it's suddenly the big crime.
Yes.
I'm just like, okay, so herbicides are good, and taking a knife through the surface of the soil is now bad. Like, what? So it just depends who has the money to put the stories out.
Who do you think has the money to put the stories out? I have noticed, I mean, it's been a fascinating thing where essentially all of big food and big ag has gone regenerative.
Isn't it just amazing?
It's amazing. And we're talking about Bayer, we're talking about Syngenta, we're talking about Cargill, we're talking about Bunge, we're talking about ADM. These are huge companies, and they spend more money on marketing than anybody you know spends on production. So I'm just curious, is this just a windfall for them that they can essentially not change? I believe that I certainly believe that there are real regenerative people who are trying very hard to do things differently, and God bless them, and we hope that they succeed. But they've mostly been awfully quiet about their brothers and sisters who are using massive amounts of herbicides and trashing organic at the
Right.
same time.
They trash organic at the same time, and they claim that organic. The other thing they keep claiming is organic people use all these pesticides, which is another weird thing. So we come back to going back though in time to the late 80s, early 90s when this was really starting. The other thing that the organic farmer, cotton farmer, had to deal with were insects, pests, where they had insect pests, which in my case was Arizona. And that area was rough. We had pink bollworm, that was the main pest, pink bollworm, but also whitefly. So those insects required pretty sophisticated and expensive management. And the management involved the company I worked for, the pheromones. So most of the management was involved in something called male confusion of the pink bollworm. So you would...
Males are already pretty confused, Sally.
So this involved taking all these strings that were embedded in the pheromone that I used to work growing the insects for them to test. And so I had this sort of connection to the products because I'd worked there when I was so young. And my major professor, one of my professors at grad school, had worked also on the male confusion of pink bollworm. I used to raise pink bollworm because there were two aspects of this. One is the USDA was rearing millions of pink bollworm, which I worked for a while doing, and then releasing them sterilized males. So they would release males that had been sterilized with some sort of UV light. Mm-hmm. They would be out flying around. And then we who were doing the cotton organically, would put at the ends, around the fields, these little strings that had the pheromones that would confuse the males. So we had the males confused by too many pheromones, and then all these other males flying in that were sterile. Mm. So this would reduce the general population of the pink bollworm. In addition, the cotton itself was resistant to pretty much all the insects.
Were the yields of an organic farm lower per acre than the yields of a chemical farm?
Yes, in some ways. Part of that was the color itself was a lower yield because I was only starting to breed this cotton. I'm still not, so the issue of yield is not just how many bolls are there on the plant, but what are the size of the bolls? Right. And what is the ratio between the lint and the seed weight? So this is called the seed lint, the lint seed turnout. So modern bred varieties all have like 35%, sometimes even more, lint to seed turnout. What I started with on the green cottons that I have, they were 15% lint. Mm. The brown, I'm still at like 22%, 24%. So there's lower turnout. You think you have all this cotton, you go to gin it, and it's mostly seed. There's not as much fiber. The fiber around the seed is less than the commercial white cottons. But the other thing that changed, and this has to do with water and the whole talk of water, is that in the 80s, conventional cotton cultivation changed dramatically by using plant hormones. Remember I was saying how cotton is a tropical perennial grown as an annual in temperate climates?
Yes.
That was to do with the fact that it's a plant that, we're pretty good. We're breeding for ones that do produce flowers this first year, but they really don't want to. And the only way you initiate the flowering of a perennial that you're treating as an annual is to stress it. And in the irrigated West, the preferred mechanism of stressing the plant to encourage it to begin flowering is to stress it by water. Withholding water and also withholding the nitrogen. Mm. So you don't want it to have very much nitrogen, and you don't want it to have very much water until it really gets going with its flowering. And after that, you can give it some, but not very much. In the 80s, I don't know who it was BASF, I don't know, somebody came up with the chemical plant hormones to apply to cotton to get it to flower if it had lots of water and fertilizer. So suddenly, the conventional cotton in the West, in the irrigated West, went from being half to 1 bale of cotton per acre to 4 bales an acre because you weren't stressing the plant to get it to flower. You were able to put a bunch of cheap nitrogen out. Cheap to you, the farm, not the environment, but you could put a bunch of nitrogen out and water it like way more than you normally did. And you would be rewarded if you use the hormone correctly with these incredible yields.
Yes.
So the conventional cotton production system shifted to this other system, whereas those of us doing organic stayed with the old-fashioned one of we're still getting the plant to flower by withholding the water. And so there's this divergence between the conventional, which is now, if you have irrigation and a lot of water, not all years do you have all this water, right? If it's a drought year, the conventional person is not going to use a bunch of this hormone. They're going to grow it the old way and get smaller yields. But they still get the benefit in their soil of the roots going down and breaking. They still have the benefits of the cotton crop, even if they're not getting a huge yield. But they have the capacity, if they have water and if they have the nitrogen, of getting massive yields. But the organic cotton farmer doesn't have those hormones to use. So the organic cotton farmer is still using the tool of water and reduced nitrogen to get the plant to flower. So the yields would be, instead of 4 bales, 1.5.
A bale being like 500 pounds
of fiber.
Of fiber. So okay, so now let's become a consumer, a citizen.
Right.
And we're saying, here, citizen, you can buy this cotton shirt and it can be organic or it can be conventional, chemical. And the organic cost twice as much to produce as the chemical. Can you explain to them why they should choose the organic? I understand for the farmer, it's like I didn't get exposed to all these pesticides, so my kid's not going to be part of the lawsuit against Monsanto. But I'm just curious, for somebody who's just buying the product somewhere else, do they have to care about you? Do they have to care about your soil? Exactly. And if they do have to, if that is the point, why should they? What can you tell them why they should care? They're not going to eat the shirt.
No, but the cotton seed. Remember, we're talking about the cotton seed being, in the case of modern varieties, 2/3. In the case of my cotton, 8/10.
Yeah.
The seed goes to dairies. The seed is the primary feed to dairy cattle. And so without organic cotton, you don't have organic dairies very much. They are connected to each other.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there is a food produced by organic cotton, and that is the cotton seed that goes to the dairy cows. But other than that, back when I was starting out, and even though it was my thing that I wanted cotton organic, the people buying it from me didn't necessarily know it was organic. They were just happy to not have the dye part because they cared about the pollution at their end. They were worried about the dye effluent, and they loved the color and the kind of magic of it. And so my marketing thing in those days was organic is just better. Like it's, okay, so look at this shirt I'm wearing, right?
Yes,
see
beautiful.
These stripes?
Yes.
So the brown in this is 30% brown, 70% organic white, 30% organic brown. I mean, it's just little bits of it, right? Small amounts created a pattern.
So this shirt that you're wearing had no toxic dyes used at all.
No, and it's all organically grown,
Did it
even
have
the
to
white.
be bleached?
No,
So it is just as it grew.
right.
And
Even the white is as
even
it
the
grew.
white is natural.
Right. And this was spun in North Carolina, woven in Pennsylvania, and cut and sewn in Vancouver, on Vancouver Island, in British Columbia. So this is Dana Lee Brown's shirt. So this, the pants I'm wearing are Japanese, and the outside is indigo dyed.
Yes.
Organic cotton, indigo dyed, which is a natural dye. And then the inside is my brown cotton.
Yes.
So, and the socks, my brown, you can't see that. But at any rate, the point of this is my original marketing of the product was more appealing to the mill's desire to be good stewards of their earth,
Yes.
of their environment, of the people who lived around them, their downstream. That's what they were interested in. They liked that the cotton was pest and disease resistant. They liked that. But they didn't, I don't know that they did not make any marketing things to their customers about it being organically grown. They just liked that it was.
Yes.
And this was my thing, right? This was my big chance to do something, which was to use the money from the color to help farmers figure out the way, because as you know, it's not so easy to figure out how to grow these crops without these chemical inputs.
But it is doable.
And they did it, and we did it. And we did it because we made enough money on the product to fund. I had a full-time entomologist every week walking every field. I had a full-time agronomist who helped it took technical expertise.
Yeah.
All of us working together, and none of this sort of like, I figured it out and I'm not going to tell you. No, we worked as collaborators.
Yes.
And with respect for each other. And none of this, what I see now so common is people pulling each other down to say, I'm better. We didn't have that. We were more or less, even the people that didn't like each other, still we acted like a community.
Yeah.
Why would someone care about their clothing being organic? And this is where the skin comes in. Okay, so your skin is your largest organ in your body, and it actually is absorbing things. You look at people who do nicotine patches and all sorts of medicines they do by skin patch. You do absorb. So if the fiber in your clothing has toxins, you get them in your system. Mm-hmm. So if you were wearing clothing that has toxic dyes on it, you are getting them. That's what the point of this is. This is what's next to your skin is the brown, not the dyed.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of people that actually can't take dyes. They get rashes and things. They were like my first customer base.
Yeah.
They tend to be people who have some sort of many people who have autoimmune diseases end up being very sensitive to particular dyes. So the dyes themselves are more of the issue on the skin, in my opinion, than the organicness.
Yeah. So dyes are a big deal, and part of what has gone on is that it has become economically advantageous to grow naturally colored cotton if you're dealing in a system in which they're forced to pay to clean up the dye mess. And I'm actually going to make a guess that even if they're doing a good job according to the standards, it's still not the same as not having done it in the first place.
Well, maybe not. They were pretty good.
I
got
get it.
really, really good. And
Okay,
it did
okay.
cost a lot of money, though.
It cost a lot of money.
And so, isn't this interesting that the big retailers, all starting with Walmart, then, sort of every big player ended up deciding that they were going to buy products from the parts of the world where everything was dumped into rivers.
Yeah.
So out in the period of time from when I started selling in the marketplace and growing the business for all these farmers and all these mills, during that time, by the end of the 1990s, all of the big players in textiles had gone to buying everything out of China, India, Pakistan, Indonesia, where even if there were rules about dye effluent, no one was enforcing the rules. And something, a pound of yarn, that if the dye waste was cleaned up, maybe, here's an example. There was one guy at the Gap. He was their sustainability guy. Back then, they had one person was a big deal to be a sustainability. Now there are over 100 people working on sustainability at the Gap. One guy was working there, and I used to help him. I sent somebody one day a week to help them source organic cotton. So we were trying to do a khaki thing. I was designing khakis for them, mixing my browns and greens and white to make particular khakis for them. And he just finished this whole study that, cost me a few $1,000s at a research mill to make all these up, and I'd sent it to him. And he called and he said, guess what? We're getting offered khaki trousers already cut and sewn for less than what a pound of cotton costs. And that's what the corporation's going for. They're buying that. We're done. We're not buying, nothing's going to be made in the US anymore. And like that, in 2 or 3 years, the industries, every single mill I was selling to 38 mills around the world. Every one of them went out of business. Every single one. Not one left.
And they went out of business because their customers, which were the brands,
stopped buying from them and bought from their competitors in places where the dye wastes were dumped. And labor happened to be cheaper too.
yes,
So not only so they did all this innovation, they designed and created all these fabrics that these customers took the designs and brought them to these other countries where they dumped the dye waste and have had no labor rules that were enforced. So suddenly, it used to be the profit margin in the industry used to be modest. People used to be making 10 to 20% profit margins. The spinner, the weaver, they were all happy at 10% profit. And people who worked at the Gap made modest salaries, and the people I knew at Levi's made reasonable salaries. Suddenly, when they started buying all these products in places that it cost so much less, they did not lower the prices significantly at the retail. They, instead of making 20%, they're starting to make 80% profits. The retailers, Levi's, Gap, those guys are now all making massive profits. Massive, huge profits versus modest profits. And all these smaller businesses that were spinning and weaving and knitting closed. Out of business like that.
And I think it's important, Sally, to just really highlight that it isn't that those smaller businesses were inefficient, it's that they were responsible.
Right. They were responsible, and most of them were multiple generations of owners. Like, I remember I was selling to this mill in Italy. So I used to buy these round the world tickets. You could get a round the world ticket where you had to be gone for at least 6 weeks, but less than a year. And I would go and visit all my customers once a year on the round the world ticket. I start here and I go east, and then I went all. So I would go, and I remember there was this yarn fair that was in the basement of the Louvre. Do you remember? You know how you see the pictures of the Louvre and they have this like what is
Pyramid.
it called? Pyramid.
Yeah.
So I remember going down the stairs. Here I'm very young at this point, and I'm always nervous and insecure about myself, right? And I remember I was so nervous. I was going to see 3 of my customers at this yarn fair at this under that pyramid at the Louvre. And I get to the booth, and here's this again 70-year-old man, tears. He just found out they were closing his mill. He was 5th generation owner of the mill, and that was it, closed.
What country was he from?
Italy.
He was from Italy.
Yeah. And so the destruction of what in most cases spinners were, very multiple generation things, and people began working. Fieldcrest Cannon, we did sheets. I did sheets with Fieldcrest Cannon. They were in Kannapolis, North Carolina. I remember going to the mills, and the guys, the managers, most of the managers of the floors of either the spinning or the weaving were African Americans in their 50s who had worked as a kid and worked their way up, and now they were the managers of a beautiful mill. All of them lost their jobs. Like they had built all this up, and they were extremely efficient, high quality, amazing industries. Yeah. Just like that, wiped out.
And this, as I understand it, this was both organic and non-organic.
Oh, this is has nothing to do with organic. All textiles.
All textiles.
Very few people even knew this was organic. I knew it. It was certified.
Right.
And I had a trademark. I still have it, Fox Fiber Color Organic. I let everybody use it for free. No one had to pay a penny for that mark as long as they used my cotton. I registered it in every country, in every category. It cost me hundreds. I don't even want to go into how much it cost. I did this for everyone, right?
Yes.
Now, you have to pay this, you have to pay that. Everything, all the certifiers require a lot of money. Not that, of course it does cost money. I know, it cost me a lot. But I did that. I did that for people so they could create the market. And then it was gone. And what took over was this organic cotton that was white, dyed every color possible, with the emphasis being on, all of a sudden, the sustainability story had to be that you were using organic cotton and not a word about how is it processed. Yes. The focus became, let's pick on farming and let's leave our part of the story out. We're not going to talk about how we are putting our color in. We're not going to talk about that we are dumping dye waste. We're not going to talk about exploiting workers. We're not going to talk about any of that. We're only going to talk about how we should be using cotton that doesn't have pesticides. That's what the marketing became for organic cotton. And this so-called organic cotton costs 20% more than organic, not double. Yeah. So the few of us that remain organic in the US have had to compete with and we really are organic, and ours costs at least twice as much because we are actually organic. We've had to compete with these other parts of the world where there are legitimate long-time organic cotton producers in other parts of the world. I know them, I remember them, they are wonderful. But along with them came a whole bunch of people who were sort of forced by contract to be organic. And they see organic as some sort of like colonial imposition on them. And they even write stories about it and publish about how they don't want to be told they have to be organic. It's something that someone makes them do instead of something that comes from them, that they want to do, that they dream of, like that they decided this is what they wanted to spend their life developing. So it becomes a bad word, organic, for them, because someone made them do it instead of they wanted to do it.
The craziness is a lot of what you're talking about right now is in India, which is where organic came from.
Right.
Right? Albert Howard, right? And Louisa, they were learning from the peasants of India how to do this.
Right.
And they came back and they realized there was a need to make it a political movement because there's this massive chemical industry building up. And so they took this very traditional kind of very skillful farming and they turned it into a political movement, which it still is. Right. But the amazing thing is to go back to India and they're going, oh, you're making us do this. Right. It's not what we believe in. Right. Well, they're trying to make a living.
Right. And there are, of course, in India, real organic people. I mean, it's not like it's only those, but what I hear are cotton farmers being forced to do organic because that's the only contract they can get.
Yeah.
And they don't want to. And they're doing it because it's the contract. And then
I know some hydroponic producers who would say they're in the same situation. They don't believe in organic.
They just need that.
It's like these accounts are saying we want organic greens.
And that's what they do.
So figure out how to do it hydroponically, whatever that means. We know it's possible to get certified. It's not possible to actually be really organic, but it's possible to be certified.
Right, right.
So one thing I just want to mention for people is we can't just say, worker welfare. People are dying working in these factories, just the way they died here 100 years ago, working in the garment districts, because they had the same situations. They were locked in, no safety features.
Correct.
And the famous fire at the Triangle Shirtwaist factory in New York City, and everybody in that factory died, but it was in the Lower East Side, and the bodies were lined up on the sidewalk. And the photographers were there from all the papers. And Francis Perkins, who became the U.S. Secretary of Labor, was there too. And because people could see it, they said, we won't accept this. We won't tolerate it. Right. And out of that, a lot of things came, right? A lot of safety standards came. OSHA came. There was a real chance for the life of workers in America to change. And now, the clothes we're wearing are mostly coming from Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, someplace where somebody is being paid very poorly in a very dangerous situation. So it's not just the farmers.
Correct.
It's also the people who are milling, also the people who are weaving, running, working the factories, the people cutting, the people sewing.
Right. So to Gotts's credit.
Can you explain what Gotts is? Because people won't know.
So Gotts, which I'm sour grapey about, because they allow dyes. Anyway, Global Organic Textile Standard, and in their credit, they make sure that the working situation is safe and that there are no slaves. And that the dye wastes, when they use dyes, that they are cleaned to the standards of the U.S. and it's actually a German organization. So they actually do, when you see the Gotts logo on organic, it actually really is organic. Now, they've made a huge effort to make sure that it's not GMO cotton. They test for it. They test for pesticide residues. They inspect every mill along the way and make sure there's no dumping of dye waste, no slave labor, safe working situation, etc. However, it goes beyond, it goes like way overboard. Like my customer in Japan, they, like a lot of people in Japan, which of course has higher standards than the US in terms of dye effluent and labor, they're paid more per hour than our workers are paid. And anyway, like a lot of the people in the textile industry are older people in their 80s, for instance. Like the Gotts inspector, when I was just there, they were telling me they're not gonna renew their license because they want them to put a new roof on their barn. And it's like, what? because they don't think the roof is safe. And so there are mills in the U.S. that refuse to, like the spinner that spins this, absolutely will have nothing to do with GOTS because they're so mad. Like, we started organic here and we aren't going to pay all this money for someone to come in and ask my workers one-on-one if they're slaves. Yeah. Like, it really is insulting. Yeah. So there are difficulties with every certification. And what we have now are things that can erode. However, if you're a normal person at a store and you see the GOTS logo, you can be sure that the dye waste was not thrown in a river, and you can be sure that nobody was a slave and that they actually had a safe building to work in. So despite my little negative comments, it's actually like a real thing, the GOTS logo. I, on the other hand, because in the US, since so many won't do this, I feel like we need something here for US made that is not part of GOTS. Okay. This whole business of testing for pesticide residue is creating havoc for some of our farmers, because with organic, with organic you can grow your farm is certified organic. Some neighbor on a windy day applies something and some small amount gets on your produce. You're not supposed to not be able to sell your crop. We aren't supposed to go out of business because of the bad behavior of a neighbor. We have buffers, we have all these things, but the current GOTS testing will take the whole crop out. Yeah. It is then sold as conventional. Yeah. Which puts the farmer out of business if you've put all this into your organic. Right. By one windy day with a bad neighbor. Yeah. And so we shouldn't be put at risk because all these other people were faking their organic. So it's a challenge that we have of U.S. domestic production, in my opinion. So, I would like to see us stick with our organic standards, which does not require, we test for GMO, but we don't test pesticide residue on all our products. Yes. Because it's not our fault if a neighbor applies something on a windy day. It really isn't. We aren't applying it.
So let me ask you a question. You told me that there was a rebirth of the American organic cotton industry that happened at some point because the brands realized that the stuff that they were getting from Southeast Asia really wasn't organic. It wasn't, according to Hoyle. And those brands had been sort of looking away going, well, it's certified. And suddenly the publicity was too great and they realized they had to do something. Right. And they came back to America because they knew that they could trust it. Yes. And then what has happened? There was a chance, right? People were reopening mills, restarting.
Exactly. So what happened was regenerative came in, and everybody jumped to the word regenerative and dumped organic.
The brands.
The brands went to regenerative, and you can see it in the shelves. You go retail. So one of the things I learned in my old days is whenever I go to a city, I walk. You go and you count colors. There's this whole thing that the people taught me how to do in retail. And the other thing you do is you go in and you look at all the labels of everything. So regenerative became the buzzword. And regenerative, here's an example. I was at this Bremen cotton conference. Did I tell you about this guy from Condiani Denim? Okay. So there's one denim mill left in Italy. One. So Italy, it's a sort of very special place for textiles. And some mills have survived. In fact, I'm just beginning to work with a new one there. But the guy who owns Condiani Denim was speaking at this technical conference in Germany that I got to go to a few years ago. Did I tell you this?
Well, please tell me. Yeah.
Okay. So he had been in a car accident and he was on all these painkillers. And he said, I'm going to say things that I know I'm going to regret. So he said, we went organic. We were using all this so-called organic cotton when it was 20% more And we knew it wasn't, because how can anyone grow any organic thing for 20% more? We knew it was fake, but we were just thinking we were supporting the concept of promoting organic. And at 20% more, we could put that in our thing and it wasn't going to put us out of business and all that. And then now GOTS came down on everybody and you have to be real organic. And now all of a sudden organic is double the price, which is of course what everybody knew it was supposed to be, but everybody liked it being 20% more, not double. And so he said, now we have regenerative and it's 20% more. So that's what happened.
Is there any certification? Or is it
for
just
regenerative,
the claim?
I'm sure there's tons of certificates. Every kind of, you look at regenerative and there are all these names. And very, as you said, there are genuine good people who are, so they are like I was when I was 25, right? Yeah. They're very devoted and they really care. And I don't think there's any advantage of putting anybody down, right? But here we had this chance to grow our market back for our organic growers, and boom, gone again, because all the big brands just went to regenerative.
And the regenerative brands aren't claiming no pesticides.
No, they're just saying regenerative.
Or they're not
it's such a good word,
no chemical
right?
fertilizers.
It's just like natural, regenerative, what are these words without a definition? And I understand it. I just went through my certification. I hate it. Every year I say, I'm never going to do this again. I can't take certification anymore. I have my own trademark. Why don't I just use that? I just can't take it anymore. It's so cumbersome, and it is exactly what the kind of people that are the people who care more about money and process and paperwork, they love that kind of stuff. I don't, and the people who farm in general are not motivated by record keeping. So it's a very challenging thing because we need documentation and certification, but I can't take it anymore. And I know I'm not alone. Right. And so when I look at regenerative without any definitions, there's this attraction. Like, wow, well, maybe I should just go. You could just say the word. I don't have any of the stupid paperwork, right? So I don't know. It's just a mystery.
Yeah. What to do.
Right.
One thing that I see, and it is the great issue around real organic, is it is more expensive. And it's not... So I was interviewing somebody and they were kind of unhappy with real organic because they went, well, of course, that's just for affluent people. Right. Because it costs more. And most people can't afford that. And so they're getting whatever, stuff that's really bad for them actually, right? And things that they do pay for, they just don't pay for it at the cash register. And so what her suggestion is what we need to do is change the regulations so they can't do the things that they're doing in chemical agriculture and make it illegal.
Right, wouldn't that be nice? Isn't that what we all wished? I remember Amigo Bob saying, they should be the ones that have all the lists of all the chemicals, like there's the apple, and then you put apple on the thing at the thing, and then you put all the chemicals. And us, we just put apple. Yeah. Yes, this is how it should be, but we are we sort of went this path that has taken us to this place that's untenable in terms of paperwork and fees and all this stuff. Inspectors making more than we make. Yes. All this. It started out and this is where we are, and then we have this whole other thing of cheap products, cheap clothes that people wear 2 times and throw away. The bizarre thing is not you and I, but the average person in China supposedly wears clothes 2 times and throws them away. Twice, throws out. And I know that's also true in the US. That's how cheap clothes have become. And I design yarns and fabrics for products that are going to last 30 to 50 years. And that's how all yarns and fabrics used to be designed for. 30 to 50 year lives, useful lives. So this idea that you need all these clothes that you're gonna throw away, where does this idea come from? I don't know. Influencers? Like, you can't wear the same thing more than once? I don't know. The culture changes, and I'm not part of that.
Well, I think part of it comes from them being so inexpensive. The question is, what if clothing wasn't so inexpensive? Well, obviously, you would own less of it and take better care of it. And is your life impoverished because of that? The problem is it's a very difficult thing to say.
Right.
Because people go, well, nice for you, you can afford it, but I've got 2 kids and I'm working 2 jobs, and don't tell me.
Right. And we're hearing this right now with the tariffs.
Yeah.
Right? And there's this whole, I want $2 instead of $10 or whatever the conversation is of the moment, of all these cheap toys from China or wherever, cheap clothes from China. So instead of looking at it that way, I like to look at it that back to this vision of us being the only animals without any hair, fur. The clothing, textiles are actually an act of magic. They are our chance to transform ourselves and be more than just ourselves. They become our mechanism of connecting with each other. They're our mechanism of expression. They're an homage to skill and creativity. And if we start talking about textiles as art and craft and something we treasure, then it changes the conversation from this, why can't I have clothes that I can throw away after 2 uses? We don't want to throw our clothes away after 2 uses. We want to remember all the processes that went into it and the love and connection that everyone had along the way. And I think that is a story that is crucial for this switch. And the other little switch of this wearing clothes twice and throwing them away is because so many of them are made out of polyester. So we used to have cotton and all natural fibers made up the predominant fiber of textiles. Now it's back to 60-70% are polyester, which is oil, which creates these microfibers that get into our brains. All throughout our bodies, these microfibers are building up and gumming up the works. It's actually highly toxic. And so people wearing those clothes, yes, they're cheap, they're poisoning themselves. Just like we used to be aware of the poisons in the food, the textiles that are man-made fibers are getting into our bodies and all the animals' bodies and the soil, and they do not biodegrade, and we don't have a mechanism of getting rid of them. And so the argument of, yes, we need clean, cheap clothes can be solved by high quality raw materials produced at scale for simple garments. T-shirts, jeans are simple, easy to produce with machinery that doesn't require a lot of labor. There are plenty of products that can be made inexpensively in the US and in other, in places where you're not exploiting people. Exploitation is not required to make inexpensive clothing. But I don't think until the business community is off of their addiction to 60% profit margins, 50% profit margins, even, until they get back to the 20% profit margins that they used to be when manufacturing was closer to, when the manufacturing was closer to where it was sold.
Yeah.
When we get back to that, the prices will not, it's not that the prices are going to be way higher, it's that the take of the corporations has to come down. It's not the material. It's the margin of profit that the stockholders are demanding of the corporations that are making the things.
Okay. Fantastic. I love it.
Sorry, I went on and on. I'm getting tired.
No. I think I promised you we wouldn't go this long, but we
Okay.
did. So,
Yes,
Sally,
yes.
I next time I come to Full Belly, I hope to continue this because we didn't even get to genetic engineering.
I know.
So we have other things to talk about. But
and you
thank
do
you
need to, oh, good.
so much.
I hope.
It was great.
Thank you for listening to the Real Organic Podcast. If you have a spare minute today, the single most effective way you can help us grow this movement and others to find this podcast is by leaving us a rating and a review wherever you listen to our podcast. You can find a video version of this interview on our website or on our YouTube channel, and you can join us every Sunday for a new episode featuring voices from the organic movement. And if you haven't already, please sign up for our weekly newsletter at realorganicproject.org/email. See you next time.